Hi all, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for the final event in our Fall Kitab Talk series. My name is Emma Harver and I'm the Director of Outreach for the Duke UNC Consortium for Middle East Studies. And we are thrilled to have you joining us this afternoon for a presentation by Christopher Silver from McGill University. The Kitab Talk series is a collaboration between the UNC Center for Middle East and Islamic Studies and the UNC University Libraries. And we moved virtually during the pandemic and found that the virtual environment has afforded us the opportunity to bring in many different speakers and reach wider audiences. And so we're so glad to have you all joining us this afternoon. This program today is specifically co-sponsored by the Carolina Center for Jewish Studies. So we thank them for their support and collaboration. I am here with my colleague, Rustin Zarkar, who is the UNC librarian for Middle East and Islamic Studies. And I will turn it over to Rustin to introduce our speaker and add any additional details about our program today. Thanks so much, Rustin.
Thank you, Emma. Welcome, everyone, to Kitab Talk. And I want to thank Emma for a very generous introduction, and we are all very excited to be introducing Dr. Christopher Silver, who is the Seagal Family Assistant Professor in Jewish History and Culture at McGill University. He's also the curator of Gramophone, which is the project that he will be focusing his presentation on, which will preserve and document the Jewish musical past of North Africa. And I'm very excited for this project, and I would just like to extend a warm welcome to Chris. So it's a pleasure to have you, Chris. And so what we'll do is we'll turn the floor over to Chris, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So if anyone has any specific questions during the presentation, please feel free to include it in the chat, and I'll be able to read them at the end. Or if you'd like, you can wait until the end of the presentation and you can ask the question yourself. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Chris. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Rustin, Emma, for inviting me, for coordinating this. And I'm now going to, as one does in the Zoom era, awkwardly share my screen and narrate the process. So give me a second as I do that. What we're going to do today is listen to some music together. I'm going to tell you about sort of the historical context and the background of the project, but I'm going to try and keep this as informal as possible, something a little bit different for midweek. And so, you know, the general question I want us to be thinking about, and something that animates me and my work, is sort of what do records tell us that other types of sources don't tell us? And so, you know, one of the questions, again, undergirding my research and much of my life more generally is does music remember what history forgets? So it's with all of this in mind that we're going to take a look at some things. So I should also mention that I had some notes here that I now can't see. So if I miss something and then go back to it, hopefully you'll forgive me. So just to start and situate ourselves and sort of figure out where it is we're talking about, we're going to be speaking about North Africa, or former French North Africa, roughly in the first half of the 20th century. As you can see by this map, and as many of you already know, but just in case there are those that don't, Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia came under French, and in the Moroccan case, Spanish control in the 19th and 20th century. So that's an important context for everything we're talking about, that there's a layer of colonialism and colonial rule. So again, just to orient everybody, Algeria was occupied by France in 1830. So we can see Algeria here. Tunisia, just to the east, became a French protectorate in 1881. And Morocco was divided between France and Spain, also as protectorates in 1912. That's some of the political context in terms of some of the populations we're speaking about today. Between those three territories and sort of my early 20th century, we can talk about a Jewish population of about 500,000 in total. This was a diverse community, diverse in terms of geography, but also diverse in terms of language as well. So generally, especially through the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century, this was a mostly Arabophone, Arabic-speaking population, but you also had segments of these Jewish communities who were Hakatiya speaking. So this is the Judeo-Spanish of northern Morocco and parts of Algeria as well. There were also Berberaphone communities, so Berber speaking communities. And then with the onset of French colonial rule, increasingly due to a number of factors, which we can also get to at the end, many of these communities, Jewish communities, increasingly began to speak French as well. And so just sort of that linguistic diversity is important to keep in mind, as well as sort of the historiographical context. So in other words, when we speak about Jewish history in North Africa at the turn of the 20th century and through the 20th century, that history tends to be narrated from the perspective of French written sources, and it tends to be narrated through this historiographical idea of emancipation to assimilation of the Jewish communities in North Africa. And again, this I can discuss more at the end of our talk. But the idea being here, as problematic as it is that these Jewish communities, the Jewish populations of North Africa, were increasingly brought into the French fold, separated from their Muslim milieu, and with that, again, gravitated increasingly towards French and away from Arabic, and much of this is sort of borne out in the French language sources. And here the question is, what do we hear when we listen for this past, rather than just attempting to read it? When we're talking about music in North Africa in the first half of the 20th century, we can point to a really robust recording industry that in fact already begins to take shape in North Africa, as it does throughout much of the world at the very end of the 19th century. Here are some posters of some of the many iconic Jewish musical figures that inhabited North Africa, animated it as well. Let me see, is that chat? Okay, and so just to give you a little bit of sort of a visual representation, at left we have musicians who we're going to hear from today. Louisa Tunisia, born in 1905 in Tunis to a Jewish family. We have an Algerian Jewish figure at center by the name of Salim Helali, born in eastern Algeria, not far from the Tunisian border in the 1920s, and whose career would be launched by the end of the 1930s. And then at far right, we have really a giant of post-war Arab music in North Africa, a Moroccan figure by the name of Sami El-Maghribi, who, among other things, provided the Moroccan March to Independence with its soundtrack. Again, to give you, let me see what's next on this, to give you a sense of sort of the scale of what it is we're talking about, and sort of, why these sources matter. Already by the interwar period in North Africa, hundreds of thousands of 10 to 12 inch shellac records that hold about 3 minutes of music per side are circulating across borders in North Africa, hundreds of thousands of records, and these are drawn from thousands of individual titles. So really a massive, massive industry with a considerable infrastructure as well. Jews, as I mentioned earlier, in total, out of some millions in North Africa, was a population of about 500,000. And yet, when you looked at Arabic language recording in North Africa, especially in the interwar period, it was sometimes the case that Jewish musicians represented 50% of any given record catalog. So whether it was Pate or Gramophone or any of the many other labels that were there. So really significant involvement that raises a number of questions, again, about sort of the limits of French colonialism, as well as the limits of paying attention only to French sources written on paper. Now, I mentioned just a second ago sort of the medium we're talking about. These are shellac records that actually spun at a few different speeds, but eventually were standardized at 78 rotations per minute. They were 10 to 12 inches in diameter, or 25 to 30 centimeters in diameter. Fragile, brittle, and yet contained some incredible music, captured some really the fidelity was considerable as well. One of the really major technological innovations, again, of the turn of the 20th century. And if all of that doesn't quite make sense, or you're not sure what I'm talking about, I thought I would have Duke Ellington explain it for us just for a minute, what it is we're talking about when we're talking about 78 RPM records. So let me play just a minute or two of this video.
Phonograph recording keeps advancing steadily as modern engineering skill brings to it the latest developments in sound reproduction. Revolving discs, almost 25 million produced in this country alone last year, electrically engraved with the world's finest entertainment, an expression of modern-day invention worth looking into. Let's look in on the noted band leader Duke Ellington as he prepares for a recording, working toward that accurate balancing of musical tones required for effective reproduction.
Wait a minute now, fellas, look. This is an express train now. This is not a freight train. Now, come on, give it to me with that, you know, that express train effect. Play up that whistle. Let me hear that whistle in the saxes once more. Ready? That's right. More like it. Now, come on. Right to the top. Ready?
In the monitor booth, the sound technician listens to the rehearsal through a loudspeaker and in cooperation with Maestro Ellington, brings the music to its highest sound perfection before transmitting it through the electrical circuits to the recording machines. Preparations for the recording process begin. A disc, a celluloid-like substance revolving on the turntable, gets ready to receive its musical impressions. The recording stylus is lowered into position to inscribe its musical message, waiting now to be galvanized into action by the electrical vibration produced by Ellington's music.
So you get the point, but I just wanted to give you a sense of sort of what this looks like, and also to remind that, you know, this is a process, an industry, an infrastructure that's unfolding around the world at the same time. So it's certainly not the case that a technology is somewhere first and then much later enters North Africa and the Middle East, that it's happening in parallel. And again, we're talking about thousands of individual recordings in North Africa, as well as hundreds of thousands of copies of those recordings, again, crossing all sorts of borders in North Africa throughout the first half of the 20th century. By the way, I hope everyone's okay out there, because I know a lot of people have their screens off, so it's not to shame, but I just hope, give me a thumbs up if everyone's doing if everyone's doing okay. Fantastic, thank you. So you know, it's with this in mind that I guess I sort of cut into the biographical a little bit to explain this project, and then I promise we'll return to the music in just a second. So it's more than a decade ago now that I became interested in all of this. I guess I realized that we were at a moment of transition, that this was sort of one last moment to gather. This question began to haunt me, sort of, what happened to all of this music? Did it disappear, or was it sort of in hiding? Had people safeguarded it? Because it didn't exist in sort of traditional archives as other types of documents do. And so this image here is from younger days, days of less facial hair and more hair on top of my head. And this is a scene from inside, in fact, a record store in Casablanca, which you can sort of see in the shadows here. And the scene here is, again, it's more than a decade ago, and I just waltzed in and I asked the proprietor there to give me a tour. I didn't know much about Moroccan music, let alone North African music at the time. And I asked the proprietor to give me a tour, and he started playing some records. History sometimes starts with a whisper. Someone sort of well-informed suggests something to you, whispers something to you, and your brain is sort of electrified and lit on fire. And that's what happened here. So the proprietor played me some music, and after sort of every other record, he mentioned, for no particular reason, that the musician I had just listened to was in fact Jewish. And so this happened again and again, and I became intrigued by this possibility, what stories this might, what direction sort of this might point us in. And so I began to collect, assemble, gather as best I could. Initially, in fact, vinyl records, sort of like second half of the 20th century records. But then I became much more interested in sort of the earliest recorded music, and so that's when I turned to shellac, and I, as best I could, in all sorts of venues, working with families, but also heading to flea markets in North Africa, France, Canada, elsewhere, began to collect these records with the idea that they should be heard once again. So sort of not collecting to possess, but as best I can to sort of put them back out there in the world, an attempt at some sort of repatriation, so that those who once knew these sounds could hear them again, and for those for whom these sounds would be new, to sort of again give them a sense of what the past in North Africa once sounded like. So again, the idea here was to amplify voices that were already there, but deserved to sort of circulate once again. What that led to, there were a few iterations of sort of how to best do this. What that led to is this site, and which is sort of, I don't know if it's the 1.0 version or the 2.0, but somewhere in between, and hopefully there will be additional iterations in the future. The idea being here to not just digitize the sound to amplify these voices, but also to provide as much context as possible, not just, again, not just into the biographies of these musicians, but what were the circumstances of a recording session, or what is it that they're singing about in the first place, while also sort of making sure that all of this is written in an accessible fashion, right? So sort of not necessarily high academies, but something that's readable and palatable as well. So here are a few shots or screenshots of the website, Arabophone.com. So it's a portmanteau of gharam, meaning love in Arabic, and gramophone. And you can see at the bottom, if you click on the archive, what this looks like, or what a sort of single entry in the archive looks like. So again, here, a high resolution scan of the record label is provided. If you clicked through on any one of these, you would see much more text. Also provided is some of the detail that I hope will sort of help us fill out the picture of the industry, its extent, when recordings were actually made and issued. And so what I also provide are sort of release numbers, matrix numbers, either a date of recording or release when I know it, or an approximation when we get pretty close. A number of details that I hope will, again, help us fill out this picture later, and this is something that the website is helping us to do. Everything is also, I'm sort of talking to, as a non-archivist, I'm sort of talking to or pleading my case to the archivists out there that I'm doing my best with things like tagging and metadata and the like, to again make sure that we can extract as much information from this music, both the physical and the oral, as possible. So you can see some of the tags here as well. And I just wanted to give you a little bit, some more background about the process as it unfolds, as well as I'll give you some insight in just a second into some other things that I'm working on as well. So there's Arabophone.com, which is a website. All of the audio is posted to a SoundCloud account that's available for streaming. We've had some hundreds of thousands of listens since the site launched. And also just to give you an insight into some of the software that I sometimes use, not always. But Isotope is one of the programs I use to do just a little bit, a minimal of cleaning up of the audio. I don't always do that, but I sometimes do that because some of these records were particularly well loved, played over and over again, meaning that the grooves, in fact, have degraded, or one side of the grooves have been degraded. And so I do my best to, both using receiver, preamp, other sorts of things, different size needles and the like. I do my best to extract the audio originally, and then in certain cases I clean it up as well a little bit. I touch it up a little bit. This is just something sort of like on the other side of things that I wanted you to take a look at, that there's sort of a much longer, this is a Google spreadsheet, but just a way to sort of to track all of the information contained on these records, again, in the hopes of eventually making more sense of the recording industry as it once existed in North Africa. And that means, as you can see here, we're dealing with not only sort of major international labels, but local homegrown ones as well. So not just the gramophone label or HMV, but labels, as you can see here in Morocco, like Olympia, in Tunisia, Al Hassan, and Sabah in Morocco as well. So just for those, again, who are more archivally minded, for those of you out there to know that I'm doing my best to make sure to capture as much of this information as possible. Now, I wanted to now, again, play some music before we come together for some questions. But first, I wanted to take a step back and offer some liner notes to think again about what this music offers us and what we're going to hear in just a second. So, I have some things here about what we can learn from listening to these records, insights into Jewish life, and of course, into Muslim life as well, of the imbricated nature of the Jewish-Muslim relationship, of Jews and Arab nationalism, and we'll hear that in a clip shortly, of the impact of global events. In other words, these musicians are not just singing sort of the classical and the popular, but also the topical as well, what's happening around them, and then what sort of possibilities exist in the post-war era as well. And we can talk about what exactly I mean by that at session's end. The other thing that we can hear in these clips, and I've selected some that hopefully illustrate that, is that, when we're talking about music in North Africa, we're not only talking about Andalusian tradition, the Andalusian traditions, sort of the classical multimodal sweet music that has gained the lion's share of attention from academics, but really a diversity of traditions, popular, folkloric, and everything in between. So it's in collecting this music and assembling it that not only we can see that these traditions were diverse, that we're talking about many different types of music, that in fact Andalusian music was not the most sought after by listeners by any stretch of the imagination in the early to mid 20th century. And of course, we also get hundreds of hours of early mid 20th century audio. So that means, whether you're a historian looking at this, or an anthropologist, or a linguist, there's a lot that can be done with this material, certainly beyond anything I ever envisioned. And that's also the point behind the push to get this out there. People are going to hear things in this music that I will never hear, and that's why I think it deserves to be out there in the public sphere. Finally, I'll say, before we listen to the music itself, who and what are we going to hear? We're going to hear some of the stars of the early to mid 20th century, but also lesser known figures. But the point here is that all of them together meant a great deal to their audiences, and that's something to keep in mind. And finally, that these discs survived at all. I mean, and thanks in large part to those who held on to them for so long, is a miracle, given how fragile they are, how cumbersome it is to carry things in suitcases over great distances. So their survival is really a testament to the power of this music. At the same time, I should also mention that, as I said earlier, these were really well-loved discs, and so the sound quality is going to vary, and you're going to hear that. So most of them are sort of not in pristine condition, so hopefully you'll forgive the records as well as this presentation for that. I'm going to try and stop talking so that we can hear some music. And again, this is just some initial thoughts about what we can hear as we listen to it. I'll give a little bit of biography, and then I'll let the music stand for itself. I should also mention that I I did a little bit of fading in and fading out on these tracks, and I'm just giving you a snippet of that, and it's just to facilitate the presentation. But rest assured that the complete versions sides are also digitized and either are already available or will be made available. So we're going to start with a Tunisian record by two Jewish instrumentalists. This is a record that was released on Columbia about 1928. Two musicians named Khailous Khair and Sion Bisana. And here, what we're going to hear again is not the Andalusian tradition, but we're going to hear a selection of gaita. This is a 6/8 rhythm, a sort of trance-inducing music that was typically played with the mizwid, the Tunisian bagpipe, as well as a frame drum. And what we're going to hear here is sort of the radio edit, the radio version, in which the instruments, and this is all in quotation marks, were sort of classed up. And so the mizwid is going to be approximated on violin, and the darbuka, the tar is going to be approximated on the darbuka. So just be careful with the audio. I don't want to sort of blast your ears out, and I'm not sure how loud it's going to be on your end. So just keep that in mind, and I'll play this first one. If I can do it. Oh.
الله يا خيلو.
So next, if we just heard a piece from Tunisia, next we're going to hear a piece from Algeria, and this is 1933, 1934, and again, this is sort of in the realm of the topical, the popular, and the question here again is what animated people? I mean, when we're sort of when we're crafting narrative about our historical actors, what is it that we understand about what made them move? And here we're going to listen to a piece by the great Sheikh Saoud Lourane, an Algerian Jewish musician from Oran, and he's a musician who's very much associated exclusively with the classical Andalusian tradition, and with good reason. But here we're going to hear him sing something different, and something, a record that might be considered the first soccer chant ever recorded in North Africa. Here is Saoud Lourane singing about his hometown team, Le Union Sportive Musulman de Oran, a Muslim and Jewish soccer club from Oran that won the cup, the regional cup in 1933. So we'll take a listen to his song about that now.
اسطوانات بوليفون الشيخ سعود الوهراني. خلوني نفرح ونغني، خلوني نفرح ونغني، خلوني نفرح ونغني على اللي دموع في الطراني. زاهي وانا نشرب الكاس مع اصحاب الاسم يا ناس شيعتها ما يلها قياس في ورا نواف البلداني. خلوني نفرح ونغني خلوني نفرح ونغني خلوني نفرح ونغني على اللي زبو شامبيون طراني.
Excuse me. By the way, I'm loving the comments in the chat. They're letting me know that people are out there, and like the more snark, the better. So keep them coming. I'm in total approval. With that, we come to a recording again from Tunisia about 1928. This is a tragic figure, the first member of the 27 Club in North Africa, Tunisian Jewish musician that some of you will no doubt know by the name of Habiba Masika, really the first superstar in North Africa in the interwar period, recorded something close to 100 records in a relatively short period of time, which is remarkable. There's lots to say about her. You can sort of see her inner and outer flapper as well in the image at left. Now we're going to listen to a recording that sort of speaks to that issue I brought up earlier about this question of sort of Jews and Arab or more country-specific nationalism in the interwar period in North Africa. It's a conversation that doesn't happen in the traditional historiography. Again, that's paying attention much more so to French sources than anything else. And so here we have Habiba Masika singing a song about Syria in the aftermath of the great Syrian revolt there against the French. One other word, and I know I'm running out of time, about the materiality of these records. Not only can we hear the sound, and of course that's important, but we can also see just how much these records traveled. So you can see a sticker affixed to this record, for example, that brings it to Detroit at one point in history. So a record from 1928 that eventually makes it to Detroit before, of course, eventually making here to Montreal, where it sits in my living room. So there's much to be gleaned from the actual gathering of the discs, not just their sounds as well. So we'll take a listen to that now.
اسطوانات فودافون الست حبيبة مسيكة أنت سورية بلادي.
طامعا يلقى حماما. أنت سوري يا بلادي أنت عنوان الفخامة كل من يأتيك يوما طامعا يلقى حماما كل من يأتيك يوما طامعا يلقى حماما.
the other question about materiality here is sort of really the evidence is borne out here with this record. Habiba Masika is incredibly popular, as I mentioned earlier, and her popularity would grow in the aftermath of her murder. She's a victim of male violence in 1930, killed in gruesome circumstances in the middle of the night on February 20th and 21st, 1930. And in the aftermath of her death, her popularity only increases. And so much so that her nationalist records are especially sought after. And so much so that Vodafone, that label that we just saw, indeed starts to bootleg her records under sort of hidden title, as we're about to see in here, so that they can continue to sell her records in North Africa. Anyway, this is sort of another sort of insight into the materiality. So here, from the French sources, we can see that there's concern about this label that they've never heard of before, called Arabic Record. That from the label alone, it's unclear who's on it. Malikata Tarab, the queen of musical ecstasy. They're not sure. Anyway, we'll take a listen to what Arabic Record sounded like and what was actually on it now.
اسطوانات فودافون الآنسة حبيبة مسيكة وأحمد أفندي بوليمان. موفق.
So it gets quiet for a second, and we'll just hear her voice. Watch. Maybe I'll speed it up a little. And then conclude with one more. So we'll end with one last one, and I'm sorry, and I want to make sure that we have time for questions. Rustin, Emma, are we okay if I just do one last snippet of songs? Okay.
Please go ahead.
So, the other thing is sort of, can pop music, get its due, is something that is also something that animates me. The critics sort of attempt to bury this record here, Où vous étiez, mademoiselle, kul yom asal alayki, really attempt to sort of make sure that it never sees the light of day, not only when it first appears in 1931, but for many decades after. And in fact, in some of the ethnomusicological literature, this record is really sort of lambasted through the 21st century. But I should also say that this record by a Tunisian artist who went by the name of Dalila Taliana was likely the best-selling record in North Africa in the first half of the 20th century. You can see that it was repressed multiple times, and we'll hear a couple other versions of it in just a second. Again, on the question of sort of what one can hear on these records, at the end of this clip, we'll hear Dalila shout out to a figure by the name of Asher Mizrahi, who was a Palestine-born born Jewish recording artist, but also a cantor, chazan, and someone who at this point in history is really known only for his sort of religious persona, not known for his role in popular music. And yet, if one just listens to the music of the era, you can hear him embedded into the grooves of these records. So we'll take a listen to this song now, which is in a mix of French and Arabic.
allons prendre un rendez-vous. Chouf une فسحة très gentille. Nous allons prendre un rendez-vous. Chouf une فسحة très gentille. Allah معاكي l'amour est doux. Allah معاكي l'amour est doux. Vous êtes la seule dans ma vie, ma pardonneur, ma demoiselle. Où vous étiez, mademoiselle, كل يوم أسأل عليكي. Je vous aime, oh oh ma belle, je deviens fou, bénédicte, ma parole d'honneur, ma demoiselle. Nous allons faire une promenade, في العشية. Nous allons faire une promenade, ساعة 6 في العشية. ارحم عليا je suis malade, ارحم عليا je suis malade. دوايا ريقك العسلية, ma parole d'honneur, ma demoiselle. Où vous étiez, où vous étiez, où vous étiez, mademoiselle, كل يوم أسأل عليكي. Je vous aime, oh, oh ma belle, je deviens fou, bénédicte, ma pardonneur, ma demoiselle. لا لا عليك يا شير يا مزراحي.
So I wanted to have time for questions. There's more audio that maybe we can play at the end if there's still some interest, and these are different iterations of the same song, including many decades later. But maybe I'll stop it here to make sure that we give everybody enough time to ask questions or to offer comments. And so I'll turn it back to Rustin and Emma for that.
Thank you so much, Chris. This was a fantastic presentation. I'm so glad that you were able to share with us some of the music you've been able to preserve. And I also want to thank our lively chats and those who participated and have been asking questions. So we do have 10 minutes left. So I will open up the floor for if anyone has any questions. Before we get started, I guess like there is one question that I'm also very curious as well. So this was asked by Nadira, and the question is, do we know who the other vocalist on the Masika track was?
He's not identified. So there's 2 Masika tracks. There's the second one is Ahmed Bouleman, who was someone she recorded with often. She also recorded with a figure named Hassan Banan, but we don't know as of yet. But it's one of these figures.
So I see that we have a question by Andrew, and then we also have a hand raised by Hossein. So I will read Andrew's question, and then we will turn it over to Hossein. So the question from Andrew is, thank you for the wonderful talk and recordings, Chris, and congratulations on the forthcoming book. And I will say, Andrew, thank you for plugging the book. I actually forgot to do that at the beginning of the presentation, but for those of you who are interested in Chris's research, he has a new book coming out with Stanford University Press on which is coming out June 2022. It's called Recording History, Jews, Muslims, and Music Across 20th Century North Africa. So please do check it out. So the rest of the question is, I'm curious what you make of the fact that the records you're exploring so often do not surface in archives. What might they reveal about them? What might that reveal about what we deem worthy of preservation? And secondly, what do you see in the future of media history in Middle Eastern studies being?
Thanks, Andrew. And Andrew has a great book coming out as well that we should also plug about cassettes in Egypt, which I'm really excited about. I think this is sort of a moment of I don't know, sound studies, media history in MENA. That's incredible, and really good questions. I mean, you know, we can like why didn't these records make their way to archives? In fact, sometimes they did. So like the radio stations in North Africa, the official state radio in North Africa during the colonial period, some of these places had archives or phonotechs or places where they kept records, but there was also a process both by these radio stations and in some cases libraries where or archives where these materials were sometimes held. There was a process of deaccessioning where things were gotten rid of because they were understood as obsolete or no longer necessary, or everything's going to make the jump to the next technology, right? Shellac, all of it will make it to vinyl, to make it to cassette, and so forth and so on. So, you know, it's you know, I think the question raised here is like how, when we try and write about the past, we need to use all of the tools at our disposal. We have to think about archives in myriad ways. We have to get beyond sort of institutions. And I'm not saying, I don't think I'm saying anything new to anyone here, and especially not to Andrew, who knows this quite well, that if we're attempting to narrate the past, we have to listen for it as well. And that means turning to different types of sources. I think also music sometimes has this sort of aura or persona that it's only the realm of ethnomusicologists or musicologists, and I think it's important that others understand that it is accessible. And it's an important way, again, to understand and listen for our past. So, you know, I would say sometimes this material was kept and then it was deaccessioned. Other times it wasn't deemed worthy of being archived, but then individuals, right, like the historical actors were so interested in, indeed sort of archived this material on their own, right? They held on to it for as long as they could, hoping to hear it someday again. They might have lacked the right playback equipment or whatever it is, but they did this work. I mean, they held on to it, and that's no easy task as well. So I guess it's thinking about archives in different ways, and like a more than a tip of the hat to those who at great personal cost preserved this material.
Thank you all, especially Chris, for this fantastic presentation. And also thank you, Emma, for organizing this wonderful lecture series. And this will be our last lecture for the fall semester, but we're hoping to come back for spring. So I do encourage you all to stay connected with us and to participate in future events as well. So thank you so much. And I want to say once again, thank you to Chris. And by the way, his book has a fantastic new cover that I've seen on social media. It, for some reason, it's not on Stanford U Press yet, but it's beautiful. Please get the book. It's fantastic. So I look forward to having that website updated with that image. But thank you so much. And for everyone, enjoy the rest of your day. And please stay tuned for more Kitab Talk lectures. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.